Now we come to the last document. This is a copy of Special Order 191. It's written in the hand of Stonewall Jackson. There's no question about this because we have authenticated copies of his handwriting. In addition to that, we have a sworn affidavit that D.H. Hill caused his own adjutant general, his own adjutant, a guy named Ratchford, to sign. That says this is Stonewall's writing. D.H. Hill tells us that on or close to September the 9th, he's not exactly clear precisely when it was that he receives this document. But D.H. Hill tells us that Stonewall Jackson came to him and handed him this document. And that D.H. Hill thought that this document was going to be important. He doesn't tell us again quite why. But it was so important that he decided that it would not be, he would not leave it with his staff. He would not file it away in the official documents of his headquarters, which of course Confederate regulations required him to do. Instead, he tells us a story that he caused this document to be sent to his wife in Lexington, Virginia, and told her to take care of it for him, that he was going to need it someday. And that 6-7 months later, when he is in Tennessee, it becomes public knowledge that McClellan had received the quote lost order unquote, and that the newspapers were reporting that it was intended to have been received by D.H. Hill, because D.H. Hill's name appears in the lower left hand corner on the back page that we'll look at in a minute. So D.H. Hill started to take heat from various sources, including newspapers. And he tells us he wrote home to his wife and he told her to get him the document, which she did, and then he started waving it around as his defense, pointing out that under the Confederate regulations there is absolutely no basis for the staff of General Lee to be sending a courier on a horse riding to his headquarters to deliver to him personally this order. Since under the regulations, he and his division being assigned to the command of Stonewall Jackson, it was Stonewall Jackson's responsibility to communicate to him any movement orders, and Stonewall, as evidenced by this document, did exactly that. So the idea is in fact ludicrous to suggest that two couriers on two different horses are riding from two different headquarters to deliver to D.H. Hill two copies of this order, and along the way, and this route is just several miles. This is not a long distance these guys are traveling. It's from one part of the suburbs of Frederick to another part. One of them somehow loses his order wrapped around 3 cigars in a field, in a farm field. This is a story historians and Civil War writers have accepted for 150 years, and it's just plain nonsense. I mean, if you're in the jury box and this story is being presented to you, I'm afraid you start laughing hearing it after you've gone through this evidence as we have today. So that's D.H. Hill's story. Now, the one thing, beyond the fact that this is clearly written in Stonewall's hand, and indeed obviously delivered to D.H. Hill, there's no dispute about it. It wasn't something manufactured after the event. The one fact about it that makes it clear to us that General Lee and Stonewall are involved in a conspiracy here is the syntax in that sentence in paragraph 6. Let's look at it. Now, it's real tough to read, isn't it? And that has a lot to do with the way in which this particular document was preserved. but I will read for you. Paragraph 6, General Walker with his division, Leavittsville, between the end of the mountain, as far as practical, cooperate with General McLaws and General Jackson in intercepting the retreat of the enemy. This is exactly the language that you found in the lost order copy that is in McClellan's hands. That tells us that either Stonewall copied his text from the copy of the drafter of McClellan's copy, or the drafter of McClellan's copy copied his text from Stonewall's. One or the other. It's obvious that Stonewall did not copy his text from Marshall's 7-paragraph copy of the order that went to Davis, nor did he copy his text from the 10-paragraph version in Chilton's letter book. There's two distinct lines of action going on here. Both of them, the ribbons of both of them are in the hands of General Lee. On the right hand, General Lee is dealing with Chilton, A.P. Mason, and Marshall. And on the other hand, General Lee is dealing with Stonewall. So, the conclusion that I'm offering you is that General Lee gave Stonewall McClellan's copy of the Lost Order that General Lee had drafted himself, despite his injured hands, as a draft, as the first copy. And Stonewall copied from that this text, which he gave to D.H. Hill. Now, why did he give D.H. Hill this copy? One would say, well, he just gave it to him in the ordinary course of the regulations, as D.H. Hill suggested. That's certainly what the historians and Civil War writers will tell you. But I offer you the other theory that seems to be more logical and persuasive under all the circumstances of the case. And that is that General Lee and Stonewall picked D.H. Hill to be the fall guy. Someone had to be identified as the recipient of the order to give it credibility when it reached McClellan's hands. They had to pick somebody to be the culprit, to be the fall guy, to be the fellow that lost his copy. And Stonewall picked D.H. Hill because D.H. Hill was his brother-in-law. They had a family relationship. They were married to sisters. And in picking D.H. Hill, he wanted to give him a defense. That General Lee and Stonewall knew that eventually this was going to come out, that this happened, and that people would attack D.H. Hill. And so Stonewall gave him a defense. He gave him this text in order to give him a way to defend himself by showing that he actually received this copy and therefore wouldn't have gotten another one or expected another one. Now, Stonewall's version of this order is in the custody of the North Carolina Archives, the State Department of Archives in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's maintained in a vault. It was received by the archives sometime in the 1930s or 40s. It came from the daughters of D.H. Hill, who had preserved it. The reason it's so difficult to read is that it came to the archives apparently in a form that involved it being crumpled in some way, and an archivist, in frank stupidity, decided to put an iron to it, and in ironing out the creases of the paper, he basically destroyed, to a great extent, its readability. Although you can read it, it's extremely light, however.